I got to do a little bit of tiny bit of work with Pixar on this new Coco film that they're doing.
Oh, fun.
Getting them a guitarrón and a vihuela, so they gave my wife and my girls, my 2 daughters, a tour of the Pixar, which I guess you have to be invited. I didn't know they don't do that, but it was. They even let my daughter work on the computer where they do Toy Story, and it was awesome.
Oh, cool. That's really neat.
But yeah.
Let me turn these down a little bit. And then, did you want to lose the pencil, or you like the flare of the pencil?
That's up to you. If you don't want it, move it out of the way.
Okay, I think we're ready to go.
Okay.
So we'll just
Good?
Yeah,
okay.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for having us over. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you guys.
One of the things I thought might be cool to talk a little bit about is your history, your family history. How did your family first get involved with making instruments?
Well, the business started way back in 1928 with my grandfather and my great uncle. My grandfather was actually a furniture maker and repair, and but he was also a musician. They would bring him instruments that needed repair, and you know, he'd say, "Well, I'm a furniture maker. I'm not an instrument." But there was nobody in the little pueblo where he grew up, or where they were there at the time, and he started repairing them, and then eventually started building them, and got a reputation and started doing well, and it just kind of took off from there. Even at a time when everybody was ordering instruments from Spain, they started to get requests from Spain for instruments. So yeah, from 1928, and then they moved eventually to Juarez, and then eventually moved the business to Los Angeles, and then I've been in Nashville now for about 14 years.
Wow, very interesting. Was your grandfather playing instruments before making them?
Guitar, yeah. He played guitar, and his brother, my great uncle, also. So they started the business together. Yeah.
What are their names?
My grandfather was Porfirio. They used to call him Pilo. Delgado, and then in Mexico they always hyphenate the last name with the mother's maiden name, so it was Delgado Flores. And then my great uncle was Candelario Delgado Flores.
Very neat. Did you get to know them?
Oh, yes, yeah. My uncle passed away in, I think, 1985. I remember it was right around the same time that Segovia passed away. But my uncle and I, although, you know, we spent time with him in Mexico, and I wasn't very close with him. But my grandfather and I were very close, because I started working in the shop when I was about 7 and built my first guitar when I was 12. So I always had my father and my grandfather. So yeah, we were very close. Yeah.
What are some of your memories of your grandfather?
He was, well, I always joke around and say, because I used to like to sit across from him at lunchtime. So we used to have the 2 benches at the shop, and at lunchtime we would stop what we were doing, take all the guitars off, put newspaper over the benches, and then we would warm up lunch and have lunch right there together. And my dad would always serve my grandfather first. And I would sit across from him because my dad would always overserve him, and then my grandfather would come and put it all on my plate. But so we sat right across from one another, and I have nothing but great memories. And then a lot of times when I'm working, I hear both my father and my grandfather, you know, telling me, well, be careful with this, or do it this way, or a lot of the little sayings I repeat to people of knowledge are things that I learned from my grandfather. One of my most favorite is what he used to say, despacito porque llevamos prisa, which means take your time because we're in a hurry. So let's take our time and do it right the first time, so we don't have to repeat it over and over again.
Very cool. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
How did your father get involved? Just growing up in it?
Grew up in it, was baptized in a guitar shop, and built his first guitar when he was 14. So I had to beat his record. That's why I did it by 12. Just grew up in the shop, and then he was in the Army during the Vietnam War. And when he got out, my dad was very smart. I know I'm biased, but he was. He had a higher clearance within the military, so he was making the brains for the generators that ran the submarines. And he walked back into the shop one day and saw his uncle, my great uncle, there. And he said, I remember just seeing him sitting kind of in the dark, and he looked just very sad. And so that's when he decided to go back to the shop also, and then he never looked back. So, but yeah, my dad, you know, just both he and my grandfather were amazing luthiers.
What was your dad's name?
Candelario also, so my grandfather named him after his brother.
Gotcha.
Yep.
That's very interesting. So it's amazing to me. I mean, what a great history, third generation. Tell me a little bit about how you guys created your niche, your own style of instrument making.
Well, I think, I mean, all of the credit has to go to my grandfather and my father. It's a bit of a challenge when you're the third generation, because they always say that the first generation starts it, the second generation builds it, and the third generation ruins it. So, you know, I tip my hat to companies like Martin. I think they're in their fifth, maybe sixth generation now, Martin Guitars, you know. So I have a lot of respect for companies that are able to carry that legacy down. But my grandfather, and we are not known just for guitars. Maybe that's part of our niche. Obviously, having Segovia as a client and having a letter of recommendation from him, he commissioned 3 instruments. That was big. Celedonio Romero. He and my grandfather were actually compadres. My grandfather baptized Pepe Romero. So, but, you know, and my dad grew up with Pepe and Angel and Celine. And now Pepe Jr. is also building instruments. So it's kind of cool to see that connection through that family where our, you know, my father and his father were friends, and to know that he and I are now in the same trade. But we're known for so many different genres because we build over 40 different string instruments. We build bajo sextos, bajo quintos, or like the conjunto, norteño, scene, or Tex-Mex. Some people will also know that genre of music. Mariachi, so we do guitarrones, vihuelas, the guitarra de golpe, arpa, the harp. Concert classical guitars, flamenco guitars, steel string guitars. I would do banjos, done work for like Old Crow Medicine Show, so square neck resophonics, or people call them dobros, Irish bouzouki's, mandolins, ukuleles, jaranas. So we do a lot of the instrumentation. Los Lobos, probably at least a third, if not more, of the instruments that they use came from myself, my father, my grandfather. So yeah, so there's so many different genres of music, which is what I love, so I'm never always doing the same thing. And we have some pretty well-known clients in each market that give us notoriety for that. The fact that we continue to build by hand, and I think the fact that my grandfather and my father continue to stay to that tradition rather than going to a mass-produced model or more of like an assembly line model, I think is also what's helped set us apart.
That's incredible. What a history. Yeah, there's no CNC machine in here.
No, yeah. People always say, where's the CNC? I say, you're looking at them. Yeah, we try to, you know, there's a few power tools you'll see in here. We have a bandsaw, and that's because I buy the wood still in board feet, and it helps me to be able to sheet the wood, so we're doing the book matching, different things like that. We have a belt sander and a thickness sander, and that's pretty much it. Maybe a cordless drill. But you know, I always say there was I believe it was either a French or an English poet who said, with morality and with art, you have to draw a line somewhere. And so for me, I always tell people, you know, if you draw a straight line, and let's say you make that line 100 yards, and then you get another line next to it, and you only make a slight deviation, maybe only a 1/16 of an inch, you won't notice a lot, maybe the first few paces, but by the time you get to the end of that 100 yards, there's a huge gap. So I had to make a decision early on, you know, what am I willing to change? What am I willing to compromise? And really none of it. You know, if we killed all the power in here, I could still get a saw out and I could cut the wood and I could do whatever I need to do. But I still like to carve in fact, my knife, I like to carve the necks by hand. And we make our own knives, chisel out the rosettes, bend the wood by hand. So to me, it's more about the craft and the art of building the instruments rather than getting them out as fast as I can and, you know, making a higher profit. We want to make sure that we're putting instruments in people's hands that can last not only our lifetime, but generations to come, something that they'll cherish forever.
Could you tell us your Segovia story?
My Segovia story? From when I was a kid, or
yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I just remember being in the shop. It was at 1066 Sunset in Los Angeles, and I remember walking into the shop. I'm sure my mom took us into the shop because I was a little kid, and there was a gentleman in there playing, and I started horsing around doing whatever, and my father just kind of going over and telling me to, you know, be quiet because the maestro was playing. And then years later, I might have been in my late, like maybe a teenager, 18, I might have been in my early 20s, I can't remember, but I remember going to see the Romeros. That was another great story that I recall, because it was my grandfather, my dad, and I. And it was Celedonio, it was Pepe and Celine, and it was Pepe Jr. So it was 3 generations of luthiers watching 3 generations of concert classical guitarists. And I remember going backstage afterwards. I've always thought of, I don't know Pepe Jr. very well. I've always thought of calling him up and saying, hey, do you ever remember this moment? Because I remember meeting everybody and standing, and I'm standing next to Pepe Jr. He's in a tuxedo. And we're both kind of looking at our fathers and grandfathers interacting. And later, like I said, when he became a luthier, I often wondered if he was going, wow, you know, because that's something he was aspiring to do. And I'm looking at these amazing, you know, guitarists going, man, I wish I could play like that, you know. But yeah, so there's a lot of great memories.
That's really cool. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about the woods and how you select what you select and how you process it.
Well, I like to do things very traditional, but then I also like to do very modern. And I know they sound like they conflict one another, but what I mean by that is I still will build a very traditional fill in the blank, you know, whatever, it's a classical guitar or a vihuela or a ukulele. But then I like to do a different model that's maybe more of a hybrid and something that's more modern, has some features that have never been seen before. So depending on what I'm building depends on what kind of woods we're going to use. And I'm still very much more of a traditionalist in that certain sense. Like I know a lot of people will use anywhere from, oh gosh, I've seen people make guitars out of, you know, pallets or hickory or whatever. And I tend to be more like with the classical guitars, you know, rosewoods, the Indian rosewoods. If we're gonna, now that obviously Brazilian rosewood has been on the endangered species list for some time, maybe we'll get into like cocobola, which is now also going to be, you know, a challenge, or mahogany if it's more of like a lower end model, palo escrito, babinga. Palo escrito is Mexican rosewood, babinga is African rosewood. And then on our tops, it's spruce and cedar, and we have a different variation. It could be Spanish cedar, it could be like a torrefied Western red cedar, German spruce, Engelmann spruce, or the Adirondack spruce. There's so many different variations. So in selecting, it's really about what is the customer looking for, what kind of tone are they wanting. Sometimes a client has an idea of certain woods that they like, and they just, oh, I really want a maple steel string guitar, and that's all they know. They like the way it looks, but my job is to find out what tone they want, what sound they want, and what wood combinations will help achieve that best. And then the other issue too, or challenge sometimes with customers, is showing them the capabilities of what those different woods can do. Because when they're used to a mass-produced instrument, they think, oh, well, all maple steel string guitars have a really thin sound. And I say, well, no, that's not true, because we're not using a model where all the sides and backs are coming through a process where they're all the same thickness. We treat every piece of wood as an individual. So we're able to get the most, produce the most from that piece of wood. If I have a piece of spruce and the top feels very stiff, I can thin that top down even more. So it would be thinner maybe than what a mass-produced instrument might do. Maybe they say all our tops have to be at 100 thousandths thickness, and we don't do that. You know, everything is by feel, by the way we know it's going to resonate, how we brace it. We can adjust the bracing. So we don't have, you know, our options aren't, you can get this body style or this body style. You can get this fret length, or we just say, what do you want? And sometimes too many choices confuse a customer. It makes it harder for them. So believe it or not, I'm sure that I know for a fact there's some sales that I've lost because it's just too much for a customer to try to make all those decisions. And I can see where a company making it simpler for them. But we still like the idea of being able to give a customer any option they want.
Did you have to change your work process as far as the wood goes when you moved from Los Angeles to Nashville?
Yeah, because the humidity here has been a challenge. So one of the things that And I still continue to do, I say we a lot because I'm always remembering my father, my grandfather, but we still do things a lot where we don't put wood and like kiln dry it and do different things like that. We'll buy it year after year, store it, and forget about it. But I like the idea of, I don't leave it outside, but I have it in a shed or in the basement of my home, and I like the idea of the wood experiencing the different weather changes, because when the player gets the instrument, that's what it's going to go through. So it goes through, all these different seasonal changes, and then when we're getting ready to build, then as we're cutting our wood, then we take all the moisture out of it and we go through those processes. But I feel like that's one of the little not so hidden secrets of why our instruments have lasted, generations and generations. I have instruments of my grandfather as far back as the 30s, and instruments from my dad as far back as the 60s. So, steel string guitars with tension, leave them tuned up. Haven't played them in years. If I take them out of the case, the neck's perfectly straight on them.
That's cool. I wanted to talk a little bit about the ukulele. I know that you guys have created your own styles and added some components to it. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So we make all the different body sizes of the ukulele, from the soprano to the concert to the tenor to the baritone. I also make the tipple, which is actually an instrument that Martin came out with. I think it was in the 30s, which is a 10-string steel string ukulele. So it has a pair, then 2 triples, then a pair. That's how it's strung up. We do the taro patch, which a lot of people aren't familiar with that. I tell them it's almost like a soprano mandolin ukulele. And then we've done things where we'll do like a concert body with a tenor scale, and it'll be a 5-string. So the top string is doubled, so it has the high and the low octave. I've done one where it was a 6-string, but I created the bridge and the nut to where you could choose which 2 strings you want to double. So you could double the outer strings, and then maybe next time you want to try to double the inner strings or the 2 tops. So it gives you the capability of making all those adjustments. We've played around with different types of woods. There's a tenor ook right there where it has a side port and no sound hole, so for an artist that was getting a lot of feedback on stage, so we made something unique for her, things like that. And that's what I like to do. I try to find out. I'm not interested in doing what everybody else is doing. If somebody comes to me and they say, wow, I'd really like you to build me a guitar like, and I say, well, just go get that guitar. It's already made. I'm not going to, I can't build a guitar. I can't build a Fender Stratocaster. Fender's already got that taken care of, But if you want something that's unique, different, electric, something like that, then come to me. Let's talk. Let's see what we can do different. I built a custom solid body electric Cuban tres for a gentleman in Florida. So that's the stuff that kind of interests me. I'm not interested in just grabbing somebody else's body style and throwing strings and changing the shape and stuff like that. I want to do something different.
There's a lot of science and math in the acoustics of these instruments, and one of the things that I'm sort of always been interested in is how far can you take some of these designs, like the sound port you were talking about.
Right.
I mean, things like that do change the integrity. How do you balance that so that you can still get the same resonance? Well,
I think, and there are some people that take it, I think, a lot further in terms of like Dana Bourgeois, who's also a friend of mine. I have a lot of respect for him. He does where he'll tap the tops, or he's gone to all these different places and investigated all these different types of woods. So for me, I take everything from more of a traditional. I tell people, because we build so many instruments, not that I'm literally saving lives, maybe emotionally and I'm saving people's lives, but I say, if you think of a doctor, if a doctor is brought a patient from Africa, from Mexico, from Canada, from Europe, for wherever, he doesn't have to speak the language or know necessarily the whole cultural background of that person. But when he's treating them on the table, he has to know where the vital organs are, where the blood flows, those types of things. And I say that's how I approach musical instrument making. So if I'm building a ukulele or a jarana or a Cuban tres, a Puerto Rican cuatro, a banjo, whatever it is, I need to know, okay, what's the tone that they're looking for? Where's the, like you're talking about measurements, what's our scale length? How's our action going to sit? What's the tension going to be? And what's the tone that we're trying to achieve? And when I know that, then I know how to brace or how to make sure that everything is put together properly so that we can achieve that sound. And if we're going to compromise, because it really is a compromise, an instrument by putting a sound port versus a sound hole, then how are we going to make the inside bracing work to our advantage to where when those strings are vibrating, and I tell people they vibrate on the saddle, just like you sit on a saddle, and the saddle is the only bridge between you and the horse. And then you have your bridge, which bridges your vibration, your tone to the top. And the top is a drum head, in essence. How do we get all of those components to work together so that vibration is coming into the instrument, making sure we're getting a good resonant and is projecting outward. With things, and again, you mentioned a sound port, a lot of times people think, oh my gosh, this instrument is so much louder. And I'm like, well, no, it's just the sound hole is right next to your ear, so it's jumping out to you. But if you're a stage musician, maybe that's something that you want. Versus if you're playing for an audience, you don't need, it shouldn't be playing for you. You should be having it project outward. So maybe we don't need a sound port. And sometimes, again, taking the time to educate people and let them know the difference.
Another fascinating aspect that you alluded to with your knife earlier is that a lot of times luthiers are making their own own tools.
Right.
Did your grandfather and your father do that as well?
Oh yeah, so I learned from them. And there's a lot of things, and it's funny now because or for me at least, because we've been in business for 89 years, I'll see these luthier stores where they're selling tools and stuff, and they'll say, hey, here's the newest, whatever it might be, and I'll be like, oh, wait a minute, that's something that, but someone was smart enough to go, hey, let's figure out a way to make this maybe easier, to make adjustments and so forth, and then let's sell it to the masses. But yeah, we've, like a gramil. A lot of people know those tools. It's a way to make an adjustment, and it has a blade in it, and you can use it to like score your binding or your purfling or different things like that. And we used to do it with a piece of wood and a knife, and we would have different notches in there according to what thickness we were going to do, and would be able to trace around and do the same thing. So it's interesting, like I said, when you see, or the way they have now to score the rosette, where we would drill. Use a 3/8 drill bit and drill through a piece of wood and put that in the center of the rosette, and then just use our knife and score the outside and then score the inside of the rosette and then chisel it out and then do our inlay. So
that's cool. Do you have any favorite stories of a project that you worked on that was meaningful to you? I really have had the pleasure to work with a lot of different folks and do some, I guess what comes to mind the most is the guitar I made for 9/11. It was called the Unity guitar. And I remember getting a call from a friend of mine when the planes hit the towers in New York, and I was in Southern California at the time, so there's a 2-hour difference. And we would open the shop at 9 o'clock, as we still do. And it seemed like everything was happening around 9 a.m., if you recall. So driving into work in LA without any traffic was eerie enough, but then looking up in the skies and not seeing any planes and wondering if we were going to be next, and getting through the day somehow, just listening to the radio and hearing all these people calling in and sharing their thoughts and stories and feelings. And then driving home, and I remember I even called Ryan Seacrest, used to be on Star 98.7, and I called and got through to him, and we had a conversation about how, instead of judging people based on the color of their skin and different things like that, how we talked about basically coming together and uniting. It was a very emotional time in our country, as you know, and it was maybe a day or two later. And I just remember kind of praying about it and trying to figure out what can I do to help contribute to this. And, donating money, giving blood, all of those things were wonderful things to do. And we did those things, but I also felt like I needed to do something more. And I remember I kind of felt like I was God was impressing upon me to, give what your talents are. So the idea came that I was going to make a guitar.
And then I was like, well, what's the guitar going to look like? What's it going to be? And then eventually it morphed into a guitar where the face of the instrument was the United States, the flag of the United States. And then we would use woods from around the world to represent unity. And then maybe we could get artists from around the world to represent unity. And this is all like grassroots, you know, talking to a friend of mine, Louis in Los Angeles, who was a family friend for many, many years and had an auto shop. And we had a mutual friend of Louis Perez from Los Lobos. And then they connected me with another Louis who ran, I think it's KTTV, is that the TV, or it was an AM talk radio station. I can't recall the call letters right now. And he did the first little bit and ran a little interview with me. And they ran like 6 or 8 spots on New Year's Day, the first New Year's following 9/11. And then from that, an attorney agency in Pasadena, California heard it. They got me in touch with Emily Simonich from the House of Blues. And then Emily got me connected because they also ran the amphitheater, Universal Amphitheater. And then we started getting artists that way. The first artist to sign it was Smokey Robinson, who I tell people, I said, as a man, I looked at this guy and I said, this man is beautiful. But he was a beautiful soul, beautiful, you know. And he was the first one to sign it. Los Lobos were the second ones. And we got anywhere from the Dixie Chicks and Glenn Campbell and Alanis Morissette and Mary J. Blige, and then we got like Vicente Fernandez, Alejandro Fernandez, Los Tigres del Norte. I think there was over 38 different artists that signed it. So we had an instrument that represented unity in the way the artists that came together, that collectively signed it, the woods that came together to create it, and then all the different people that came around to help me make this thing come true, because it's never just one person always likes to stand up and take credit for it, but I know that that's not the case. Without all of these friends and these people out of the goodness of their heart willing to make that happen. And we raised about $35,000 for Asociación Tepeyac, which was an organization in New York that helped the undocumented victims of 9/11. That was what our focus was. We were also able to fly 4 families down from New York and give them some money directly and have them be at our event, which was a very emotional thing for me when I met them. Unexpectedly, I didn't know that was going to happen. So, you know, that's probably one of the most significant that I think of, because everything that we do with Delgado guitars and with our other division, La Tradición Music, it's all about how can we leave a positive footprint? What can we do to help other people? How can we help? One of our main focuses is music education. How do we help programs stay alive where they're struggling? How do we convince superintendents, fine arts directors, mayors, senators, whoever it is, the significance of music education, what it does for a child's life, how it improves them, so that these programs aren't being cut? You know, we talk about the STEAM versus STEM, adding the A for arts into STEM education. All these different things is, and I'll tell people, I have a hidden agenda, because I got a 9-year-old and a 3-year-old daughter, and I want to make sure that they have these programs as well. So it's trying to figure out a way to make sure that that's impacting a lot of folks. Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's really well said.
Mm-hmm. Sorry. There we go.
Okay. So where is the Unity guitar now?
We actually auctioned it off, and somebody in Southern California got it. I have no idea what happened to it, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Wow.
I've been tempted to look into it, but I thought, nah, you know, wherever it is where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
I bet it reappears sometime.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
hope so. Yeah, that's the picture of the banner right there. That's what that was.
Yeah,
those were hanging on the streets in LA.
That's really neat. Oh yeah, you got one of the banners.
Yep.
That's really cool. That's an interesting element also of your position, is you're creating something that other people will be able to express themselves and create their own art. I mean, what is that feeling like for you?
To me, it's you're basically like the I mean, no pun intended, you're like the instrument between the client and then, you know, the final product. So they're coming to you with these ideas and hopes, and it's a great sense of responsibility, which I mean, I don't feel a pressure over that. I feel honored that they entrust me with that. But they're asking you to create something for them. And I mean, especially whether I was in Los Angeles or here in Nashville, I mean, I get to be around a lot of amazing creative people, songwriters and people who create, you know, music, whether it's through instrumentation or writing these beautiful songs. And then you just kind of draw that energy. So I meet sculptors, photographers, painters, you know, people who are involved in dance, different things like that. And I draw from all of that. So if I sit down and I'm talking to you and you're telling me that, you know, you want this instrument, I literally will interview you and I'll want to find out about you and, you know, tell me about yourself. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up in Minnesota? You know, do you have any siblings? You know, I'll ask, I mean, it's almost like a therapy session. People tell me, it's like, tell me about your folks, you know, and you find out people will, through their conversation, start to show you the things that are relevant to them. And when you say things to me, I see those like in different colors. So I'll start thinking, oh, okay, well, there was a gentleman named Kieran who lives here in the United States, but he's from Ireland originally. And I remember when we met, and I met him, I think we might have, I forget if I was in his home or if we did a Skype thing, but I feel like I was sitting in his office. But I remember in the background he had this C, but it had this beautiful design within it. And that design ended up I used it for the rosette. And then his father, I think the father's name was like Andrew or something, and the biblical translation was like spear of God. So we put a spear in the center of the rosette. The mother, I think, was Elizabeth, and it transformed to dove. So, you know, we look for like the origination of the names. And there was a dove on there. And then being from Ireland, we use a lot of mother of pearl because it has that kind of fog. To me, it looked like fog, and I always think of Ireland, never been, but I think of the green, lush cliffs dropping off to the ocean and the fog. So we used dark, dark emerald green inlays with the mother of pearl, and then we had some blues in there, like abalone shell, and some blue inlays to represent the ocean. So there was all these things where if I was playing the guitar, you would look at it and go, wow, that's a really cool rosette, or I like that design, but to the player, it had significance. And that's the idea. You know, I want to, if I can in some way help put a tool in the hands of these people that create and help inspire them who inspire so many others, that's, you know, that's a great thing to be able to do. And when you finally hand that instrument to someone and you see how they react, that's where the payoff is right there.
That's well said. It reminds me of this great line that I picked up from Tommy and Manuel, who I got to see this last week, which was so awesome. He says, when people ask him, what's the perfect guitar? He says, it's the one that inspires you.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I tell people. They say, well, do you make the best guitars? And I say, well, that's really, I can't say that. Because the best guitar for somebody could be a $100 guitar in a pawn shop. If they've been looking for a certain sound and they haven't been able to find it, and they pick that thing up and they're like, oh my gosh, this is what I wanted. I wanted that kind of that loose string slap sound because maybe they're doing like Delta blues or whatever, and that's the sound they wanted. So for me to, you know, walk around with my chest puffed up and say, oh, my instruments are better than anybody else, we do the best we can. You know, we put our heart and soul behind it, but it's up to the individual, you know. I got to meet him years ago. We used to do the CAS show, the Chet Atkins Appreciation Society. And it was new to me, having just been in Nashville, I think maybe a year or two. And I remember I had a little booth set up in the corner right next to Mel Bay. And Gretsch Guitars was just a few spots over. And here comes this guy. He comes in and picks up a guitar and starts playing, and a crowd forms. And we were inside a room in one of the hotels here, the Airport Marriott, I think it was, or Sheraton. And little by little, the crowd is getting so big that I'm getting pushed back into the corner. And I remember I'm standing there with my arms crossed, and it's kind of getting annoying after a little while. And I'm like, who is this guy? I'm thinking to myself, right? And he's a phenomenal guitar player. But when you've been hearing, you know, 8 different people playing Chet Atkins songs all day, you know, just like NAMM, that noise can kind of get to you after a while. And I'm sitting there, I'm getting frustrated, and I'm watching this guy, and I just kind of shake my head, and I look over to my left, and there's a Mel Bay book, and it's got him on the cover. And I'm like, Oh, okay. Then I was like, I better listen to this guy. But he's a phenomenal guitar player. Yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, speaking of NAMM, do you remember your first NAMM show?
Oh gosh, I don't know how old I was. I was young, but I remember it used to be at the where now it's the Staples Center. It used to be in Los Angeles, in downtown Los Angeles. And I remember just kind of going in there and like, I had no idea. And I still have that reaction when I go to the one in Los Angeles, because it's like, you could go here every day from open to close and you wouldn't even get a chance to see everything. It's just so phenomenal. But yeah, I remember walking around and you know, my father took me and just being amazed at not only the amount of people and seeing how many, you know, all these companies that do harmonicas, you know, or accordions, but even finding that there was so much more that a lot of people don't associate sometimes with NAMM. I remember one year going when it was in Anaheim, this is now when I was an adult, and they had like some clinics on finish, you know, so as a luthier, so there was companies there that were selling a specific type of finish that was for musical instruments. One for piano versus string instruments, where the string instruments might need to have a little bit more elasticity, ability to breathe with the temperature changes, and maybe, you know, it's not like a piece of furniture where you can lay a heavy piece of polyurethane or polyester finish on and not worry about it. But yeah, so anyways, I remember that they were selling cables, selling, I mean, everything from marketing, advertising type things that can help your business grow, to companies that help you with shipping, companies that help you find insurance for your company or for how when you send things out. Everything. It really is everything. POS system, point of sale systems. I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize how much NAMM has to offer until they actually take the time. And if you just go get a badge and walk around, you see mainly the instruments. But if you take the time and research what the organization is all about, the association and all the different things that it offers. I mean, we ship directly with one of the organizations through NAMM, and we benefit as being a NAMM member by getting steeper discounts. So we're competing with companies that are doing $10 to $20 million a year in our shipping, because we're able to do that through NAMM. And I mean, you're looking at the shop, you know, it's only 2,000 square feet because I built the second floor. So, you know, things like that, it just makes there's really a great value and a community in being a part of it.
Well said. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Since you're so articulate, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you something else. Another shameless plug for the work that NAMM is doing. You indicated with your children the importance of music education, and you know that we're very steep in all
DC.
of that.
Yep.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your views on.
Well, again, music education is very important to me. It's something that as a company we've dedicated a whole division just to that. And when you have a partner like NAMM, and it's even strange saying that because, like I said, we're just such a small company, but that's really how NAMM makes you feel, like you are part of what they're doing, and you're involved in the voting process and different things like that. But they have active members that have been in the music industry for so many years that are taking our fight to DC, and they're bringing in different people, you know, the drummer from the Red Hot Chili Peppers or whoever it might be, going to Congress to talk to them, to, you know, advocate on behalf of students, on behalf of music educators, and really on behalf of parents, because even whether parents know it or not, they're going to benefit from that, even if they're not aware of the power that music has. The different studies, independent studies that are published, and NAMM helps partner with those by advocating or offering information for them, and then we in turn can get those studies. Sometimes they turn into a TED Talk, they turn into something different. We can add those to our social media, we can send them forward when I'm talking to a fine arts director or a superintendent, you know, and showing them how graduation rates will go up. You know, in one situation here in Nashville, we had graduation rates go up in 1 year, over 30%. in one program, in a mariachi program. Mariachi in Nashville, Tennessee, and it helped graduation rates go up 30% in that demographic. I mean, how obscure, you know what I mean? We're not talking Los Angeles, we're not talking a border state. We're in the center of the United States, where people would be like, Nashville, Tennessee has a mariachi program? Yes, we do. And, you know, through the local Music Makes Us, which partners with NAMM and has benefited from some of the scholarships and grants that NAMM has given them, and it helps put instruments in those kids' hands. I mean, there really is. There's so many CMT, CMA, all these people are all working together, and it all comes through NAMM and filters, and then it goes through all these other folks, and we're all benefiting from it. And again, getting back to your original question, but you know, how it going to DC and taking that fight to DC, and you know, unfortunately, a lot of these senators and so forth, they're more concerned about their votes than doing what is the best thing to do sometimes for their constituents or the people who put them into office. So we have to show them, the people that put you in office want to see these things continue to exist. We want to continue to see music programs do well. We want to continue to see kids benefiting from having a variety of different genres of music to learn from. We don't want to do away with band, choir, orchestra, but we want to add mariachi. We want to add hip hop, world drumming, lead guitar, whatever it might be to these programs. And it takes having organizations like NAMM spearhead those things so that we can continue to do it.
Can I just take you home with me?
Sure.
That's awesome.
Well, I've been blessed to work with the National Endowment for the Arts, and I'm a commissioner for the arts here in Nashville. And I was one of the founding, not founding, I was blessed to be asked to be one of the board members for the Music Makes Us here. And I also worked with, we have an organization called Make a Mark, where we try to stop some of the gentrification that's happened in other cities. So, you know, I'm not one to sit back and look at something and go, oh, that's horrible, somebody should do something about it. You get up and you do something about it, you know? Don't wait for the change, be the change, right?
That's awesome. Very cool. Another thought I wanted to glean from you is just your thoughts on the trends that are happening now. What instruments are more popular, and what do you see your customers asking for?
Well, I know that the ukulele has been very, very popular for some time now. And, you know, I think, unfortunately, Tiny Tim is given credit for kind of killing it. Because it used to be an instrument in the 50s where they were using that in the schools to learn. And then it was like when Iz and Jake Shimabukuro and Eddie Vedder and Train, all these companies, or all these music groups and individuals started making that instrument prevalent again, and we started seeing a resurgence of that instrument. But then, believe it or not, mariachi is huge, and we're seeing it now because we've seen a lot of U.S. companies now that, and it's funny, companies that I had gone to in the past, and I'd say, hey, why don't we do a set of strings, or why don't we do this? And now they're calling me and they're saying, hey, let's do these strings. And I'm saying, oh, too late, I already got my own line. You know, I partner with La Bella and we do our own line of strings for mariachi. You know, creating different products instead of me waiting for somebody to do it. Now, and again, through NAMM, I've been able to make those partnerships. And, you know, we design a lot of proprietary products, our own finger picks, our own tuners, different things like that. But for a specific style of music. So mariachi is one of the fastest growing music programs in the United States. And if any other music companies are watching this, I didn't just say that. So no, but it's true. And you see it, like when you see big companies investing and starting to make those products to be competitive, then now people are going to go where there's money. And, you know, our sorry, it's the clock there. My Corvette clock.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a lovely shot.
Our goal is to, you know, we believe in making great products, doing right by people. We don't make customers, we make friends. And then from that, the financial gains will come from it. We'll never make a decision just based on how do we make a lot of money or how do we make the most money. We do the opposite. You know, we have UPS or, you know, a shipping company accidentally damages one of our products. We don't make the client wait until we file the claim, and we just send them out another one, and then we go through the battle with it. And if we lose, we lose, but our client's not going to be on the losing end of that. You know, little things like that.
You know, there's a lot of regulation. It seems like it's ramping up for woods and importation and even carrying them out of the country.
Right.
How does that affect your customer?
Well, what I always try to do is educate them, because most guitar players, you know, when they say how many, you know, guitars is enough, and they say just one more, you know, is never ending. So even though they might be ordering an instrument from me, they probably have a variety of other instruments. So sharing with them the dangers of carrying an instrument that has endangered species out of the country, what documentation might be needed, the new issue with the East Indian rosewood. And, you know, unfortunately, we were just hurt by that by accident, so to speak. They were going after the furniture makers. It was the furniture makers who were using up too much of that wood, creating an issue, and that's why CITES put that ban on East Indian rosewood. But luthiers or guitar companies can continue to still use it, but now the documentation, I don't know if you've seen how, I've actually seen, like, so if you're dealing with a larger company like Yamaha, or, you know, one of these companies where they're shipping in, you know, containers full of these instruments, they have to put what the total cost of that instrument is as far as their cost, and then they have to separate all the components of that instrument by weight, by name of origin or scientific name, and by what each individual part costs to combine to make that total cost. So binding, rosette, frets, machine heads, string, nut, saddle, you know, I mean, it's ridiculous. And if they have to do that when they have, you know, maybe, I don't know, 1,200 SKUs or whatever it is, and maybe 400 of those use East Indian rosewood, whether it's just a small part or, you know, if it's the sides, the back, whatever. So it's created a lot more paperwork, which in turn, you know, creates time and costs for a company that large. For us, we're a small company. It doesn't affect us that badly. We just make sure that we're informing our clients, you know, okay, hey, I want you to build me a guitar with this. Okay, just I want you to know that this is what's going on, and there is a potential that this wood could later be an endangered species also for guitars. So make sure you save all your documentation. And then the burden of proof lies on the end user. Even if they went through all the proper channels and thought they got all the proper documentation, but if somebody forged that paperwork or something, even if the end user didn't know, you know, they're susceptible. So by doing that, a lot of our clients, maybe some of them who have old Gibsons or stuff, if they're going to go do a tour in Scotland, or, you know, they're going to go to Canada, whatever it might be, say, you know what, I think I'll leave the guitar with the Brazilian rosewood bridge and fingerboard at home. You know, it's just not worth it to think that that Gibson might get, you know, put away somewhere in a locker and never seen again, when it was, you know, they've had it. This is this vintage, beautiful guitar that they worked so hard to locate and to get. So we just try to make sure that we're passing along information.
Is there paperwork and documentation that you can give your customers?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, fortunately, so now we're starting to see a lot of, if we're ordering certain types of woods, it'll say pre-CITES stamped on there. So we keep that original receipt of where we located it from, and then when we give a receipt to the client, we break down all the components of the instrument. And we're not doing it by weight, size, cost, but we're saying, you know, the binding is made of this. People want to know that anyways, because they have such a, you know, something that's so special to them. They'd like to know what everything is made of. But having that information, and then having that date, and then filing that sale with that documentation of when that wood was purchased. So if, God forbid, if they were to ever have an issue, we can at least help them. We even do things like if a customer brings us a repair, and I always get the serial number and the make and model of the instrument, which I'm sure that's not unique to me, but the reason we do it is so if, God forbid, if that client ever were to have that instrument stolen, we can help give that information to them. They can get it to the police department, and then they pass that around to the pawn shops, and if somebody is foolish enough to take it to a pawn shop, they'll get that instrument back.
Very interesting. So what is it that you look forward to the most when you come into the shop?
Oh boy. It's so crazy right now because we're ridiculously busy. Sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, you know, I mean, what I enjoy the most is being able to build. we get so busy sometimes that, you know, I just say, you know what, today instead of getting frustrated about not being able to get to the bench, I'm just going to know that I'm going to be at the computer all day. I got to take care of all these things. And then tomorrow, I'm not going to answer the phone. I'm not going to answer emails. You know, I'm just going to let my office manager handle all that stuff, and I'm going to try to get things done. But for me, I mean, building is what I love. If my wife and daughters are traveling and I'm home by myself and it's the weekend, I'll come in here. But I just lock the door, turn off the front light, shut that door, and I build. You know, I like to listen to classical guitar music when I'm working. So I'll just put on some classical music. You saw Oreo. Yeah, Oreo will hang out with me in the shop, and I just like to just create. That's what I enjoy the most still. It gets harder as your company is growing and you're doing a lot more things, but that's still what I love to do. When they say find work you love and you'll never work another day in your life. So.
Well said. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, thank you guys. It's been an honor.
Very cool. Is there anything else I meant to ask you? Is there anything else that you'd like to add? I think we've covered everything I was hoping for.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Good stuff.
All right.